Hi there, this is going to be a small debrief on the assignment one since I finished marking it. So first of all, I encourage you to watch them. I'm not sure everyone has had taken the time to watch all of them. It is so at least 30 minutes for each of them, but do take the time since this really constitutes a large part of your learning for Unit 1. And many of them were excellent. So you have a lot of learning there that is offered to you through the presentations themselves. So some general remarks that might be useful for all of you going forward into other team assignments. First of all, it's really important that I see equitable division of work. And that has to be immediately transparent to me. I have to be able to see this from the work itself. So keep that in mind. Really, there has to be equitable distribution of work, and you all have, if it's an oral presentation, you all have to be present in that oral presentation, right? So most of the groups did, one group did not. So keep that in mind, and it's something that we want to see in all the group presentations in the future. Use your time wisely. Here you were told a 20 to 30-minute presentation. Some of you opted for fairly descriptive segments and lots of segments. It did equal to longer than 30 minutes. And sometimes that time was used in very descriptive sort of activities, which are useful. But then you have to strike a balance between the descriptive and the analytical. And these presentations are an assignment that is necessarily leading you on to, sort of conceptual analysis of certain key elements. So the longer you spend being descriptive, the less time you have to be analytical. I think you've got to find you still want to be engaging, so you do want to spend some time, such in describing experiences or setting your reflection in context. But you also have to hit the meat of the subject. So it's a fine line. So make sure you don't get too distracted with the engagement part, and you still get to the analytical conceptual analysis part. And in some of the presentations, you did. It's a first, so it was your first try, but you did spend sometimes a long time describing rather than analyzing. Enjoy it as well, right? So making a presentation engaging is also having fun. I didn't take into an account this time because it was your first ones, but some teams seem very tense, very, very tense. So try and have fun as you're doing it. Try and include maybe little interactive activity, even if people are not in synchronous time with you. The idea of quizzes was interesting. Sometimes the idea of the panelists themselves asking each other questions on behalf of the audience is good too. So a quick little sort of interludes where you engage the participants is good for the engagement and the fun part. Careful about ethics. So one of the groups asked questions to an individual, and I'm not blaming this group. Someone often does this, and then we have to turn it into a learning sort of opportunity. You cannot, in assignments, any assignments on MELM, or any program in university generally, you cannot include data collection or interviews as part of your assignment because you need to go through ethics if you do that. And ethics is a long process. You're not going to go through ethics to complete an assignment. So just be careful. You don't ask direct questions to individuals relating to information that you will show or talk about in your assignment. You cannot interview people for the purpose of an assignment. And there was also talk about putting a child on camera. You can't have photos or videos of minors, and particularly, minors. On this occasion, there was one of you talking about their child, but even so, family members, kids in schools, avoiding all assignments having audio visuals for ethics purposes as well. Keep the user experience in mind. Some of the tools which you chose where they made sense from your perspective, but if you were to watch them again as a user, they were sometimes hard to navigate because the links to the videos didn't work depending on which presentation format you were on. Some of the voiceover on PowerPoint is okay, but it's not great because the user keeps hopping from one slide to the other and has to click. So obviously, maybe you're going to be doing these sort of presentations for quite a while now during MELM. So maybe explore different software. There's a lot of software there to turn sometimes your slide into a video, which can be a lot more effective for the user experience for the people who are watching you. I'm not going to give you any specific products because there's a ton out there, and there's probably stuff that's completely free at this stage. It might become paying later, but at this stage it's still probably free in development. You have CTED, so you have the studio at CTED. You can reach out to CTED as a student, and they can give you support as well. If you're worried about contacting them, you can send me an email, and I'll forward it to them, and they'll get back to you. But they're there too if you have specific questions about specific software. And lastly, again, coming back to remember that assignments are always about some sort of critical analysis, or or at least the unpacking of certain concepts and some key terms, some key ideas, possibly with reference to the literature. So that work has to be done. Always be worried when you are too descriptive for too long in an MA assignment. Because it's rarely the perspective from which we approach in a graduate program. Description's okay, but it serves a purpose. It's to introduce themes, to introduce analysis. So if you see yourself in a phase where you're describing too much, then it's time to shift gears and to go into analytical mode, or analysis mode, because we want you to get to certain key themes or key concepts within your presentation. But apart from that, you're on the right track. There was definitely some excellent work produced. Some of you have a little bit of reflection to do still, and then will improve, as a result of that reflection. Do please watch each other's work, because this was really quite important, a huge part of the learning for Unit 1. So it's not a matter of just skipping through it and just focusing on what I'm saying. This is really a case of, again, social constructivism and collective creation of an understanding through the different sort of angles that you took. Now, in terms of wrapping up as the content itself, something we didn't touch on, and none of the groups touched on it, so I'm going to bring it up now, is that maybe one of the limitations of the charter protection is that it doesn't consider intersectionality. And it should have started to jump at you when you see that some of you talk about race, some of you talk about sexual orientation. These are individual grounds for arguing discrimination under the charter, but there isn't really a mechanism that enables you to recognize intersectionality and realize that you might be, for example, the talk on race and talk on ethnicity and national origin were very close. And you could see that they were starting to overlap, and it's normal because obviously there's a lot of intersectionality there. But it might be important at this stage to expressly state it as a limit of the Charter protection that intersectionality is badly sort of crystallized in that legal framework. And in the process, you have essentially to elect whether you feel more discriminated against on the basis of this or on the basis of that. There's no process for you to actually sort of accumulate these experiences and show the intensity of the discrimination, because it doesn't just come from one ground. There's also the notion of analogical sort of grounds for discrimination. So you have the main grounds, which are listed under Section 15, as you've all said, but you also now are starting to have what they call analogical extensions of the protections. And under this, gender identity has been recognized. The rights of indigenous individuals outside of reserves have also been recognized. These are sort of legal stretches that are created by case law. Why they're analogical? Because they're not actually enshrined in the charter, but when a complaint is made by an individual under the Human Rights Commission, be it provincial or federal, and it reaches the Supreme Court, it is likely the Supreme Court will recognize it as an extension of the protection. So that's why it's called an analogical. And that list is going to, obviously, with case law, is likely to increase. One of the rights which we didn't see mentioned here, and I think it's likely to come to the Supreme Court's attention at some point through a case, and then to create case law, is the recognition of discrimination on the basis of socioeconomic status. And for our students, it's becoming more and more relevant that you should not be denied certain rights simply because you are from a socioeconomic status that prevents you from having access to certain things. Here, I particularly in mind, and you have a text in the suggested readings of parents who are getting used in the public sector to paying for activities. And that may seem like nothing because it may be $20 for a cinema ticket, but now in the public sector, depending on, again, catchment area, neighborhoods where you live, you can often see these trips turn into, $200 days, $500 weekend, and many extracurricular opportunities are offered by public schools now, such as trips overseas at a huge cost. And there's immense pressure on the parents to come up with that money. Now, obviously, they're getting away with it so far because they have this option saying it is extracurricular, therefore it's not compulsory. But I think it is a fine line, and it will come a point where a parent will be supported enough to take it to, a human rights commission, because often, yes, you have the right to opt out, but when you're the only parent that opts out, it's starting to feel like actually there's very little parental choice, and that actually it is basically a school activity that is pretty much integrated into the curriculum. And it's not so much of a choice, but simply means that if you are not from the right socioeconomic background, you will be excluded from the activity de facto. So a lot of potential for this to become, I think, in the future, an analytical ground for discrimination. And there will be others, right? And that's the beauty of common law and this theory of precedent, is that the charter can be extended as long as a case is brought towards the Supreme in front of the Supreme Court of Canada, and then case law would be created, and then that right would be also protected in the case law, not so much in the text itself. So that wraps it up for that activity. I will go on to mark your assignment 2, which I'm sure I will enjoy immensely. I may take a little longer because I really do take the time to enjoy them. I hope you've also watched all of the assignment 2, because the point, again, is to create a sharing of these stories, not just the storytelling itself, but that the stories reach an audience. So if you have not, I encourage you, while I'm marking them, to go and watch all of the photo voice projects and to really sort of immerse yourself in these stories. Thank you very much, and I will go on and introduce Vicky for her session now, and we'll see you very shortly.